you are. Thought you had slept in. I started without you. Daisy needs a thermostat. It's an easy job on these cars. Pull one hose. I take the distributor cap off just to get it out of the way. The wires, plug wires run right over top of the thermostat. Already drained the fluid, or the coolant. It's a toy, not a showpiece. I bought it to drive. Metal bolts in aluminum housings, if they feel stiff, don't just keep cranking them out. Crank them back and forth once or twice to make sure they feel like they're loosening up. The corrosion in there can help you rip the threads out. There's a ton of silicone on here. Give you a closer look. That is way too much silicone on there. You don't need a ton of silicone. If the surface is clean and not pitted or anything, you can get away with just a good gasket, good quality gasket. You notice I haven't pulled it out even though I'm still scraping. That just helps minimize how much crap falls in there. Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, but not really that bad on a car like this. Silicone has locked it in there. There we go. This is your basic thermostat. There's a little wax pellet in here, and as the wax warms up, it allows the thermostat, which is a little disc in here, to open up against the spring pressure. And then as it cools, the spring pressure overcomes it, allows it to return to the closed position. There, now it popped open. But it is a lot stiffer than it should be. And of course you wanted your car to run cooler, so now we'll check out the temperature on it. 195. I don't know if you can you read that? Just in case I'm not reading it right because I haven't got my glasses. You know, normal water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Antifreeze, of course, increases the boiling point of the water. And this also does too. The radiator cap. If you increase the pressure in your cooling system by 1 psi, you raise the boiling point of normal water by approximately 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So you add a 15-pound cap on there, your boiling point if you were just running water jumps up to 257 degrees, and that doesn't count what the antifreeze has. Now the cap is set to release the pressure. I don't know if you can see that, but it will, at a certain pressure, predetermined pressure, will release out the overflow tube. There's no set amount now for percentage. Used to be they said 50-50, and then they said 60-40. 50% water, 50% antifreeze. Or antifreeze water. And then they started saying 60% antifreeze, 40% water. And then some of them I've seen were 70% antifreeze. Well, what it is they're selling you weaker antifreeze. It's not as strong, it's not as concentrated, it's already watered down for you. So instead of putting the prices up, they put the concentration of antifreeze down. So normally I just make gaskets, but if I can buy one, why not? Have you ever bought a thermostat gasket that had a staple in it? What they're in there for is some vehicles The temperature sensor is in the thermostat housing here somewhere and not below it. And thermostat or the temperature sending units are a single wire device. It needs a path to ground. The reason they put that staple in there is to give you that contact to ground. When you tighten it up, the staple will contact this side of the housing and it'll contact the base. And that will give you your path to ground for the electrical circuit for your temperature sending unit. Before you put it back together, you want to take your housing here and clean it up. You don't want to leave anything on there. I take a used Scotch-Brite, one of these screw lock ones, and one that's been used so it's soft. You know, it doesn't have the same bite as a new one. It's a little more flexible, and I use those. And I don't run them very fast. You don't need a lot of brake cleaner. Wet it down a little bit, give it a good wipe. There's a little indent in here that's for the thermostat, so I want to make sure that's clean too, so the thermostat sticks or stays right flush with where it's supposed to be. Now this thermostat is just slightly different in that it's offset. That's not a big deal. But also you see it's got this little pellet thing here, looks like a rivet. And that does is it's a bypass and it stops you from getting airlocks. So mainly where the hose, the rad hose goes on there. And it's easiest just to put it on there and twist back and forth. You want to get all the corrosion off of there. You can check to see if it's warped, and if it's warped, all you need is a piece of emery cloth. Put it on a piece of tempered glass, and then just work it in a circular pattern. Give it a good inspection, make sure it's good. Take a really close look. Another thing too, there's a little bit of buildup in there, so I'm going to clean the holes just a little bit with a rat tail file. Just giving a little dab of silicone on there and just wipe it on with my finger. Make sure it's well distributed. Don't need it thick. You just need to cover the whole thing. Just covered. Next I'll put the gasket on there. Make sure it's lined up well. And just make sure that it's lined up, which it is. Okay, now before I put this back together, I'm going to clean the crap off of these threads. Now, the next thing I'll do is, that is sat for a minute or two with that gasket in place. I always affix the gasket to the removable part. And then what I do is I'll put a very, very fine wipe on the other gasket. Okay, now you can see here that it's very, very thin. You can actually see the detail of the gasket through it. And I don't install it right away. I let it sit for a few minutes to skim over. The reason I do that is the silicone will take up the little imperfections on the cylinder head where or on the thermostat housing, but it won't adhere to it. So just if I had to take it off again for any reason, it'll come off just a little bit easier. Okay, so that's skimmed over now. It's not sticking onto my finger. We have the thermostat in place. We have the cleaned bolts, and we have the housing ready to go on. Drop the bolt through. I run them down by hand. Too late now. Okay, snug it up just a little, and you notice where I'm holding the ratchet. I'm not holding it way out here getting a ton of force on it because the torque on this is likely in inch-pounds. So I'm just using basically like a palm wrench and just turning it this way. Gives you a good feeling of how tight it is. Again, very little pressure. Just firm. I'm actually watching the silicone squeeze out a little bit. I'm going to give a quick look at the inside of the hose to see if it's starting to rot. It feels good. Also, if you ever squeeze your hose and you feel it going crunch, don't drive the car because you're just going to be asking for trouble. You know, people that, well, it's not leaking yet, so I'll leave it, and then usually would get a phone call. Spent all their money on their stereo equipment instead of their car. And okay, the hose is on. It's lined up. It's not under any stress. Put the clamp where I want it. Start to tighten it. You can strip those if you tighten them too much. If it starts to feel like it's loosening just a little bit, the clamp has already been damaged. So change it. Don't think, well, I won't tighten it anymore. Change it. Okay, I got my new rad cap as well. This one's a 13-pound, which is what is recommended for this car. I can put the distributor cap back in place. And this one just has those little spring clips, one on that side and one on that side, and put the coil wire back on. First, make sure you tighten the drain, because you don't want to just pour the antifreeze straight through. You get in the habit of doing it the same way all the time. And my antifreeze bucket, I keep it clean and I mark it for antifreeze only. The drain pan I use is the same as the one I use for oil changes. So, or the same type. They look the same. So it's kept clean, and I don't worry about contaminating it because I wipe it down before I use it. Now, if you do have your antifreeze and it's contaminated, what you can do is use a funnel and cover the funnel with a pair of pantyhose and pour the antifreeze through the pantyhose. That will actually work to clean the antifreeze for you. Oil will bead on top, contaminants will stay. But I've had cases where I had to put antifreeze in that had leaves and a whole bunch of crap in it, and I've actually been able to save the antifreeze by pouring it through pantyhose. Works really well. So there you have it. Probably one of the simplest things you can do other than maybe changing spark plugs on one of these little Datsuns. And have a good one.